Hello, and welcome to Getting It,
the conversation where we try to understand life just that little bit more.
My name's Dan.
And my name is Subaan.
And we're both medical students based in London.
And in this episode, we reflect on our experiences at medical school so far, the different ways we can approach learning a broad field, and how learning ties together with teaching and should always be connected.
Good afternoon, Subaan.
Hello.
How are you doing? Whoa, wait, I want to start again. No, I got a good idea.
All right.
Okay. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Asserted.
Sorry.
Okay, no. Okay. Or good evening is another way I could say it.
Good morning.
Oh dear. Okay, wait. Take three. Okay. Hello there, Subaan.
Why, hello there, Dan.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, actually. You know, got a bunch of Amazon and IKEA deliveries, which is always nice. It's
It's Cyber Monday.
Cyber Monday, Black Friday, that kind of thing. The delivery dude was, he was having his job like pulled hard because he was
I bet
off.
the delivery dudes are shook at the moment.
Yeah,
They're working major.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, for the first time in ages, on Prime Delivery, like the estimates in terms of delivery date is coming out to like four or 5 days later, rather than it's usually like next day each time. So it was quite interesting.
Just a straight result, isn't it? That's just a straight result of the Black Friday and Cyber Monday.
Yeah, it was quite interesting because just in my head, I was like, what the hell? It's going to take like 4 days to deliver. I was like, why is it taking so long? I was like, what kind of, why is it like that? I was like, wow, that's quite a privileged position to be in, where you're so used to next day delivery that now it's going to take 2 or 3 days. And I'm like, wow, this is like, what kind of bad service is this? But
it's a ridiculous concept. Like, even in the space of our lifetime, things have completely changed in that way, where nowadays, if I lose something or if something breaks, like my phone, my phone protector broke last week, and it was just so not a problem because I literally just went on Amazon, just very quickly. Oh, there's one for like $5. Very nice.
yeah,
Just at my door the next morning. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, and at times like this, I mean, yeah, like I can imagine the having to wait a couple of days longer being an annoyance. It's crazy. Yeah, just looking
as
back
in the
a few
fact that
years
it's an annoyance it reflects badly on myself rather than the actual system.
No. But you have the perspective to realize why. You have the perspective to realize why your frustration is only relative to the time period we find ourselves in.
Yeah, because I was looking at spray paint and I was like, why is it taking so long? I was getting so irritated, and then I was like, oh wait, it's really not that deep. But yeah, and I don't know. The entire infrastructure of Amazon and the whole delivery system, at least in the UK, like pretty much anything you can get next day delivery, or if you order it later on in the day, then it'll come, the following day after. That's absolutely insane. And I don't know, people like get annoyed at Jeff Bezos being so rich and everything. I mean, a lot of his net worth is in Amazon, but then he did also make, the best delivery infrastructure in the world, the whole e-commerce thing. He changed the entire world with it, basically. So
I must admit, I do think out of all the monthly subscriptions you can get, the Amazon Prime subscription I find it's very worth the money.
Yeah, I mean, if you
I'm not plugging it, I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, I guess we are on the student Prime as well, so it helps in that sense. But I don't know, sometimes it irritates me. It's like, there's a lot of, controversial things when it comes to that much wealth, and there's the whole tax, like, they don't pay any tax and stuff. Okay, it's a lot more nuanced than most people actually understand it to be. And that's not, I'm not trying to say that I do understand all of it, I don't. But I think a lot of people are very quick to jump onto the cancel train and just, wipe people away like that just because they have a lot of money. But I don't know, if you are so against Jeff Bezos having so much money, just try boycotting all of Amazon services. But it actually goes deeper than that, because a lot of Amazon's revenue comes through Amazon Web Services. And a lot of people don't really know that side of Amazon unless you're some kind of developer or something. Because, okay, so one, you'd have to boycott, Amazon Prime and all of that stuff, no Kindle, no Audible, none of that stuff. None of the
Audible
stuff. So, and just don't deliver off there if you don't want Amazon to take their cut off the deliveries, they take from any orders placed on Amazon.
No Prime Music. I'm just kidding. Don't listen to that. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
What a flop that is. But no, and then there's what other services? Yeah, okay, so there's all of that stuff, right? Just the classic delivery stuff, all the books, the audio libraries, all of that just don't use. And then there are loads of apps you probably can't use. Like, I wouldn't be able to use Notion. Why? Because they host a lot of their stuff. All of the files are saved onto Amazon Web Services servers. Loads of companies have their entire database saved on Amazon Web Services. So you won't even technically be able to use those apps because that actually brings out a larger percentage of their revenue. So yeah, they're
They're
a
still
lot
doing
bigger
really
than
good
you
today,
think.
aren't they? The trajectory is still really positive for them, isn't it, as well?
Amazon.
Am I right in thinking that? I
Yeah.
don't really know much about it.
Yeah, I mean they're so, as in Amazon in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean Amazon's so big at this point that they're leading in e-commerce and stuff. It's hard to kind of knock them out because at this point, at least like Jeff Bezos and stuff just has money to kind of spend. He's doing Blue Origin with the whole space. He's doing like an Elon Musk with, SpaceX kind of equivalent.
Yeah,
Except
I saw that.
He has a different kind of image in terms of like his kind of game plan is slightly different. But yeah, he just made a rocket company. When you have that kind of money, it gets kind of funny. Like you just can't be stopped at that point almost. So
yeah. The other company I was thinking about was Nike recently. I only just clocked how they've changed their identity quite a lot in the last few years, because nowadays they're very luxury, aren't they? Like if I buy a Nike item of clothing, it will cost me quite a bit of money, and it would be a very nice item of clothing, I think. So yeah, that's something I only realized going on the Nike store these days. They've changed the brand almost. And I was watching a video about it yesterday on YouTube, and they were saying how Nike changed the whole structure of the company to make each section of the company directly in communication with two other sections at any given time, and it makes this like matrix. It's really cool, but it's so clever, and through like I don't know, big changes in the last few years. Nowadays, their control over the sports market is crazy. So yeah, like I don't know. It's just that's a very random thing to bring up, but no, I thought it was very.
I haven't.
Random,
I get what you mean by Nike becoming a luxury thing, but I think it's because they've become more involved in streetwear actively. Because back a few years ago, take it 5 to 10 years ago, they were still focused mostly on sport, but people started just wearing that stuff as streetwear and promoting it as streetwear. Say with the trackies and stuff, just because they made good quality stuff, functional stuff, and it just kind of looked good, so people just wear it around as streetwear. And obviously the more kind of vintage stuff, like all the classic shoes, all the classic clothes, and say with the Jordans as well, people would collect them and then wear them as streetwear, and because they were limited and stuff, it was like a luxury. So they kind of latched on to the rising tide and went along with it and kind of rebranded in that sense. But yeah, I never really actively noticed it. I didn't see it blatantly like, oh, it was a pretty smooth transition. I have to give them that, because now that I think about it, I can see it I can kind of see how it went, but I didn't actually notice it straight out.
No, neither did I. To me, they're like luxury sportswear nowadays. To me, like if I'm buying Nike running shoes, or if I'm buying Nike, I don't know, football shirt, a sports shirt, it will be nice. The Nike tennis clothes, the Nike court stuff is quite expensive, and it's all high quality. So if you compare that with Puma or Adidas these days, it's going in a different direction.
I think they've always had high quality stuff, though. At least that's why for ages I've always been like, I always prefer Nike over it, just because the quality's so good. But it's been like that almost as far as I can remember. That's why I'd always get like the Nike socks over the other sports brand, just because they would just last longer, they'd feel better and everything. So I think they've just maintained that. I guess they've probably increased it as well. And they probably just have a larger diversity in terms of their quality set. And they've probably just gone past the competitors to a certain extent as well. So I don't know. I haven't really
very cool.
bought much new Nike or just sports gear in general.
Anyway, okay.
Preamble over.
Yeah, and just a quick interlude. And then I want to just discuss one thing with you today in particular, which is med school. Because looking back at the episodes we've done so far, we haven't actually really talked very much about what we do most of the time, which is actually being students. So, yeah, I think at the moment, for me personally, I'm on a new block, I'm on a new rotation at a new hospital, and I'm really enjoying it. And at no point in med school have I had this much fun. And yeah, it's just made me look back on the last few years and realize we've been med students for a while, and a lot has changed since we started. And yeah, I don't know, I just wanted to reflect on a few checkpoints in the process and see what you think about it as well, especially going to unis with, in my opinion, quite different identities. Yeah, I think one is a bit more stringent than the other.
I wouldn't say stringent. I'd say they have different outlooks on how to go about teaching it? Or I guess Imperial being very science driven, at least in the early years, and going into a lot of detail. I mean, I obviously don't know how much detail they go into it at King's, but I just assume it's probably not as deep. At least from other conversations I had with, like, say, with you and with other students at different unis, they haven't gone quite as detailed in some of the science in the preclinical years, in years 1 and 2. But yeah,
King's is basically you take all the hard bits from Imperial and triple them. No, I'm joking. I think just the identity is different, simply. Like the whole outlook on how to teach medicine is slightly different. And to be fair, neither is better. We need both, in my opinion. But I can only speak for myself, obviously. I wouldn't pick anywhere else to have done medicine than King's. It suits me to a T, in my opinion. And it's given me space to grow as I want to grow. And I'm actually just so grateful to go to King's. I really mean that. Especially last year, I intercalated at Imperial, as you know, obviously. And I got to see a bit of how things can be taught at a different institution, especially one more on the other side of the extreme, like Imperial. And I can definitely see the merits in it, but it's tough. It was hard to go there, even for a year. It's not easy what you guys do.
Yeah, okay. But I think just intercalating and doing your BSc, your intercalated BSc, is very different to just normal medicine, just in general. Because for me, it's very different compared to the first 3 years as well. So there's that aspect. And two, yeah, it's... I think there are a lot of factors, because one is different to the previous normal year, preclinical years you've been doing, and I guess one clinical year at that point. So there's that kind of jump and twist, and you hadn't really experienced a BSc at King's either. So maybe it was just the style of things you have to do, because there's a lot of paper reading, a lot of deep, detailed science anyway. So maybe it would have been similar at King's. This isn't me trying to defend Imperial, because I'm finding it tough in this 4th year, in this intercalated year. But I guess it's probably for different reasons, though.
I'm inclined to agree with you to an extent, but a lot of the teachers we had are teachers from the med school, and ultimately, a lot of the experience, I would say, was just the Imperial experience at the same time. There are certain traits in a university that will carry through all courses you do, obviously. Just the approach to learning. I know that sounds super vague, but do you kind of get what I mean? Just the way that they expect you to learn. I understand that in the BSc year it's more research focused anyway, but the whole structure of it was different. Basically, the whole structure of the faculty is different, and I found it a lot more challenging, I would say. But at the same time, I'm not trying to detract from King's, because King's at the same time isn't easy. But I think there's a bit more flexibility. Again, it's hard to know what is Imperial overall and what is just the course I was taking. But yeah, for the rest of the episode, I won't really compare Imperial to King's, and I'll more just speak about my experience at King's, because I feel more qualified to talk about that. And yeah, I want to just take you through maybe a couple of checkpoints, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Is that all right?
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's start with... they're 5-year courses, right? Both, if you take away the intercalated degree.
Yeah.
And first year for us was mainly lecture-based. A lot of just broad overviews of biochemistry, anatomy, how to speak to a patient, really, but no
ice
time. Yeah, ice.
Yeah.
If in doubt, just ice.
That's basically what we got taught for 2 years of clinical communication, was just ice. That was it.
Yeah, I've heard things in every history-taking lesson in first year to do with ice.
Yeah.
I can remember that clearly. But I mean, it's what I found crazy is these days. So I'm in 4th year of MBBS now, 5th year of med school overall, or 5th year of uni. I look at the students around me, and some people, and it's the classic uni thing where people in your class, some people you've just barely even met before, and they've been in your class for years.
Yeah.
But some people I know, like for example, today I was sat with a girl who was my clinical partner in 2nd year, and I was with her the first time I went into hospital, and this was only in 2017 as a med student. First time I went into hospital as a 2nd year med student, And today I was with her in a small group teaching class. She was so knowledgeable. It felt like I was sat next to a doctor today. She really genuinely knew what she was doing. She was so comfortable. I was speaking to her about how her day was. She said the good bits, the bad bits. She started off with the good bits, which was like, she was like, I succeed with the cannulation today. I was like, well done. And I was like, what about the bad bit? She was like, I failed with 3. So we said you don't have to focus on the bad bits, just focus on that one patient you did get. But the whole experience of going into an ED, for example, an emergency department, and actually being a part of the team now is really, it's such a weird feeling, because it's the first time that I've finally started to feel like I know what I'm doing a little bit, and it's so motivating, feeling like you're a part of the team and that things are starting to come together. And it's just, it's making me really reflect on how I've approached med school, and how each student, especially at King's, again, I can't speak for Imperial, but at King's, each student has done it in their own way. Do you get what I mean?
What do you mean they've done? What have they done in their own way?
So they've approached the whole med school in their own way. Like at King's, there's no attendance monitored for lectures, for example. Okay, so you have people who don't turn up to any lectures. You have people who go to all the lectures. Even placement is not monitored, really. I shouldn't really say that. It is monitored, of course, but you have to do it on your own. It's more
done like informally, where make sure you show your face enough to the consultants that, they'd be fine with signing you off or something. Or at least that's how it is.
Yes, along those lines.
Yeah.
It's along those lines. So you can kind of, you have to go in at some point, but you don't have to be going in every day. You don't have to clock in and clock out at the end of the day. So you do have some students who don't go to anything really, and you have some students who go to everything and more. Ultimately because of that, and the fact that the societies at King's are very active as well, you end up with people who just are in completely different social circles, work at a completely different rate, and it's just fascinating to see everyone sort of over the years, all in their own way, evolving into doctors. Because for me, this might sound, I don't know if this sounds arrogant, but med school a lot of the time hasn't been my number one biggest interest, right? Like I understand that's what I've spent I've probably spent more time doing medicine than anything else over the last few years. But to be honest, I would say that I love doing languages more. I love reading about geography, random stuff like that, music, and sport even more. There were times at uni where I was doing tennis more than anything else. I'd be going to play tennis. Yeah, I'd be playing tennis every day. I'd literally basically every day for months on end. And I'd be going to uni sort of, I'd be clocking in, obviously doing what I had to do. But outside of that, it wasn't really on my mind. I saw myself as someone who played tennis first and foremost, and someone who also studied on the side as well. I play tennis
and also go to med school on the side.
Yeah, but that sounds, let me just clarify, I'm not a good tennis player, and I'm not saying I do any of these things particularly well. And that's another thing about med school, which I didn't realise going into it. I thought going from A-levels that med school was going to be harder in the same way that A-levels were hard. Now, I'm not here to say that med school is not hard, but I'm here to say that it's hard in a different way. It's hard, in my opinion, because you have to be very disciplined, and it has to come from yourself. But the concepts, a lot of the time, are not particularly difficult. At least not compared to some elements of A-level study even, I would say. And getting through it isn't terribly hard either if you want to just pass, right? Like to get 50 isn't, I have to be honest, I know people who have got 50s all the way through med school, passed every year, just through mainly intuition and going over some lectures. But really not much more than that. And it's possible. It's perfectly possible. And that's what's crazy about it, because you have people who do that. We're talking about the sigmoid curve of improvement, where it's really hard to get to the bit where you're improving quickly. But then when you get to the top of that, to get those last few marks is really difficult. I think you're more familiar with the with a certain end of that spectrum. I don't want to add pressure with all of our millions of fans expecting high grades from you every year. It's crazy how in the same year group, you just have people who've approached the whole year in completely different ways. I know people in my year who spend basically every waking hour, just the super nerds who just work so hard. And it's very commendable. They end up with an incredible range of knowledge, amazing med students, and a lot of them really nice, good people as well. They go into the wards, and at this point, they're basically, I've seen people who are even in third year were almost like doctors in a way. They'd go onto the ward and they were really useful, and they were appreciated being there. Yeah, and I know people even now who are still not comfortable in front of a patient. So yeah, that's the first thing I wanted to sort of talk about, the massive range in how people approach it. I don't know if you find that similar at Imperial. Do you think that there's a big range in the type of students you get, people who go in all the time and so on?
Yeah, I assume it's the same throughout every single uni as well, because everyone is different. They're going to learn in different ways. Everyone has different priorities, so they're just going to go about uni in different ways. The thing that allows you to study medicine and do so many things on the side is because you have medicine as the structured thing. There is some kind of structure to it. Whereas, say, with your languages or your tennis, there isn't any real structure to it. So it requires a bit more effort, and obviously, if you enjoy it, then you're just going to be doing it more as well. You're going to be more inclined to do it as well, because you know that you have the structure of the course, the teaching, the placement timings and stuff that allows you to, I can clock in and do this and just do this at least for the minimum, say for this period of time. And then I could maybe catch up later, but then I can focus on these other things that also bring value to me. And then that what lets you become a well-rounded student and person as a whole. And then that's probably what leads to the diversification and people going into various specialties. And some specialties, I'm like, why would anyone specialize in that? It's kind of dead, or I just can't imagine myself doing that, either because it's kind of gross or just boring or something. But some people really enjoy it, and I can see how much they enjoy it. And it makes me enjoy it, watching them enjoy it so much. But it's going to be all of those different aspects that just kind of lead people down these different paths. And yeah, I guess people also have different priorities in terms of how well they want to do and how much effort they want to put in. So you mentioned that some people will, do everything else. And then, as long as they're getting just passing 50%, just over 50% throughout all of the years in med school, they're fine with that. I think that's quite an interesting point, actually, because I just think, so if you're doing any kind of degree or course outside of medicine or outside of any kind of degree that, like, say, like nursing or anything, say, if you're doing anything outside of that, then it's fine to go about that. I guess that's your own choice. But I think with medicine, I personally think that you shouldn't intentionally just make sure that you're just about passing. Obviously, you have to make sure that, obviously, if there's a difficult exam, you have to at least pass it and do what you can. But you shouldn't use, it's only 50% to pass, so I'll fall back on that and just and I'll do other things. I think there's a certain amount of dedication and commitment you make when you go into medicine that you shouldn't be all right with just getting or just about passing. Obviously, there are going to be exams that you do just about pass. There are going to be stuff you find difficult. But at any point, it shouldn't be acceptable in the fact that, like your initial outlook from the beginning was, okay, as I'm just going to, try and pass that exam. When you could do better if you put a bit more work into it. The point at which where there's not real much point working even more is that point where you're flattening out on that sigmoid curve, right? Going a difference between 82% to 85%. Okay, yeah, you might come with 3 positions higher in the year, but in the grand scheme of things, that difference might even just be luck at that point. So at that point, I think it's all right. But just because that knowledge that you have, a lot of the stuff they end up testing is, like you said, you can get away with intuition. A lot of it is just your fundamental core intuition that you need, to be able to make decisions in certain aspects of medicine. That should already be a given, right? And that's about 50% probably. The other 50% is your extra knowledge, your extra critical, lateral thinking that you kind of have to develop and actually put work into. And I think you should try and develop that as much as you can in terms of what you can get in a high yield fashion. So when I see people that purposely, I see, not messing about, but, doing so many other things in excess to the point where they know they are even neglecting their exams and they know they are not going to do well or potentially fail. And they're already revising for their retakes because they know they're going to have to retake. I think that method of approaching, I'd say any degree, is bad, but I think it's particularly harmful with medicine just because of the nature in the way you have to, what you know and your knowledge ends up affecting patients directly. You're affecting human lives, human health directly. I don't know, I went on a bit of a tangent, but I have strong opinions about that.
No, I don't think it was a tangent. I think it's very fair, and I think it's a good point to raise. But at the same time, I would come back to you and say that I think you'll agree with me. A lot of students who end up as really good doctors didn't get the best grades. I don't think it necessarily correlates. I think you don't need to aim for the top grades to be a good doctor. I think there are plenty of people who finish in the mid 50s, high 50s and end up as really, really good doctors because, yeah, so much of being a good doctor is obviously about compassion and being safe, being careful on the wards, knowing when to consult for senior advice and just being comfortable in the environment. And I think there'll be people, for example, who spend a lot of time in the hospital setting, are very comfortable with patients, but just don't put in the work to get the minutiae. I don't know how to describe it. Like the
minute
highest
details,
grades.
like, oh, what gene is expressed in this particular condition. Like that stuff, if you can look something up, you don't need to memorize it. Like, okay, yeah, you might need to memorize it for the exam, but in the long run, you shouldn't memorize it because that's just an inefficient use of memory in your brain. But I think a lot of that stuff, like the critical thinking aspect and essentially differential diagnoses and stuff, that's a lot of what comes in certain exams. Obviously, certain exams, like say in first and second year, are probably, what kind of transcription factor is upregulated in this kind. Like, okay, whatever. But say in third year and onwards, third and fifth and sixth year, in your other clinical years, a lot of the exams are, say, clinical case based and stuff, and being able to differentiate between that. That's quite a major part of being a good doctor. Yes, okay, you do have the compassion and stuff, but there is just an innate knowledge that you need as well to even be able to make a differential diagnosis. I can have a doctor who has the best personal skills, makes me feel really comfortable and everything. But in the end, if they can't effectively and efficiently diagnose or differentiate through diagnoses, like you're almost lacking as a doctor at that point. So there is a balance where you do need that knowledge as a pure minimum, and then everything needs to be built on top of that, in my opinion. I think the knowledge is the foundation, but so you do need that. But then everything that makes you, and that'll make you a doctor. But to become a good doctor, you need everything added on top and built on top. But without the knowledge, there is no foundation. It doesn't matter if you're really good at everything else. If you don't have any knowledge to even break down any diagnoses or something, then can you be a good doctor by definition?
I do agree with you. I do agree with that. I think the way I'd describe it is competency. So like you need to be baseline competent. I completely agree with that.
So
obviously.
basically what I'm saying, I don't think 50% is baseline. I know that's why it is 50%, but personally, I don't think 50% is. I don't know. I'm putting these values on me because I don't want to be in the point where it's like something is like 50-50 for a patient in terms of me being able to diagnose something. Say in an emergency setting, it literally can be a 50-50 kind of thing. I want to have more than like 50-50 odds in me making the right decision for a particular patient. And I know obviously that kind of situation doesn't come across in exams directly, and they're obviously very completely different scenarios, but it seems logical that there is some kind of translation in that kind of ability. So I don't know.
How about the student? Because I agree with that. I do agree with that. But how about the student who gets 60 in every exam through med school? They do their work, they know what they're doing, but they don't go for the details. They are comfortable in each thing. And remember, when they go onto the wards as an F1, they're not going to be making those life-saving decisions, really.
True.
Very rarely are they. A lot of the time, they're just going to be writing discharge letters, to be honest. And it's not a case of knowing all those tiny details. It's obviously when you go into a specialty training, you're going to end up having more and more clinical decisions that matter. But early on, the most important thing from what I've seen on the from the F1s and the F2s is just being comfortable in the setting, being able to communicate with their colleagues and being safe around the patient, not doing anything silly. And I think in the early stages, that's the most important thing. And I do agree, of course, that if you don't know what you're doing, then obviously you can't. It's going to be very clear early on when you're communicating when you're trying to present a patient to one of the registrars and you're saying, yeah, I saw this kid and I don't really know what happened, to be honest. He has abdominal pain, but I'm not sure why. Then the doctor, the registrars are going to clock on quite soon. But I'm saying if you are that student who gets 60s, 65s and you know what you're doing, but you're not going for the tiny details, I think you can be just as good a doctor as someone who gets 75, 80, and sometimes better because it depends on what you're doing with your time outside of your studies. So it's at the same time though, I genuinely, I completely see where you're coming from. And I think it's a perfectly good point that the more you work, obviously, it's going to correlate strongly with how much you know. And as a doctor, obviously, what you know is very important. So
it's definitely not entirely linear as it might have came across when I was trying to explain it. yeah, it's definitely not linear, and I'm not trying to say it like that. And I'm not saying that if you're just about scraping 50s or something, doesn't mean you could easily be a better doctor than me. Like, yeah, because like you said, it comes down to a lot of things. But yeah, it's not entirely.
But you averaged 99. You averaged 99.5, didn't you? That's what I heard.
Maybe, but unlikely. But yeah, I just think that, yeah, I don't know. I feel a bit odd inside when I see another medical student being like, yeah, I'll make sure I work to pass the exam, when I know, and they know easily, that if they just put in a tiny bit more work, they'll pass comfortably, even get into the 70s, 80s with just a little bit more work. But it's just, they're just lazy or just don't want to do it. There's multiple reasons. Maybe they have other priorities. And yeah, it depends. If they're spending a lot of their other time and reading into other aspects of science, maybe they already know exactly what specialty they want to do. And they're practicing their surgical skills on the side and stuff. So yeah, obviously that's not going to translate into your written exam, right? But later on, they're going to be a hell of a good surgeon, just because they've been practicing all of that, going to workshops and stuff, spending all that time. So there is that other aspect to it. And yeah, if you're doing that kind of stuff, then fair enough. You're making the compromise there so you can really focus down and nail down on what you want to do later. And that's perfectly fine. I think as well.
Something I'm also observing in students now, so I've just started my final stage of med school. So after this block now, I'm on my peds rotation now. So I'm pediatrics, looking at just a massive range of child health conditions, child presentations in different settings in the hospital, in the emergency department, in the wards where they're more long term, in clinics, outpatients. It's a really good range of stuff. After this, I'll have psychiatry and then emergency medicine this year, and then next year a couple more blocks, and then my electives and stuff. So I'm actually starting to get more towards the end, and I think at this point a lot of students in my year have found that they've had a moment they can reflect on that made them sort of start taking it seriously. And I think for me personally, that happened fairly recently, just being in peds, not one day or one event, but just being here on a peripheral placement. So I'm outside of London, I'm going in every day, I'm living in the hospital. It's just made me
in the hospital accommodation, just for clarification, not in the wards.
Oh yeah, just to clarify, I'm not just sneaking in the canteen in the corner. Just to save a bit.
Although
of money.
Those hospital beds can sometimes be pretty comfortable,
They do look pretty comfortable, I must admit.
The recline functions.
But yeah, so I think for me, it's been quite recently that I've sort of found my identity as a med student, and I've really sort of understood what sort of doctor I think I'm going to be. I can more visualize it now. When I'm with patients, I feel different to how I used to, and it's a nice feeling. And I think that each student seems to go through that at some point. Maybe mine was a bit later on. Maybe some students have it in second or third year, but yeah, it was something that I reflected on recently. And I think those students who, as long as they're putting in the work and they're competent throughout the whole of med school, they will all have that moment, and they will all have that point where they realize that they are going to be a doctor and they are going to do the work that a doctor does. And I think it's when you finally shake off the imposter syndrome that everyone seems to get at some point. I don't know if you found that you've had it at any points, but it's so common for the students to feel like they just got in from luck, or that they shouldn't be there, or that everyone around them is so much better than them. But yeah, throughout the whole of med school, I've realized from the start that everyone deserves to be there. Med school is not the hardest thing in the world. It's just a process, and you just have to be dedicated to it. It's not as difficult, for example, as probably doing a pure science degree or a pure engineering degree. Yeah. I don't think it's as difficult as that in many ways. It's more just the sort of person you are and the attitude you have to life to be a good doctor, in my opinion. That's just from my observation so far. And as long as you have that, then I think you do deserve to be in med school. And it doesn't matter if you're the smartest or the least knowledgeable student in the year. I think the attitude is what's most important. And I think it's a nice thing to be in a community where we are all so different. The diversity is so massive, the diversity in ethnicity, the diversity in the mix of male and female students, the diversity of age, the diversity of financial background, status. You've got students in my year who are so wealthy. They come from some of the best schools. Some graduates from the best universities around the world. They're coming here as postgrads. You've got people in their 30s, their 20s, their teens, and we're all at the same point on a journey. It's just so cool to see, so many different people coming in at the same stage of life. I don't know. It's just
because that's not just for London unis. That's also just for medical schools in general. Because at Imperial, it's notorious for its extremely high male to female ratio in all the courses, except in medicine, where it's actually slightly higher the other way around. I think at least in some years it has been. So it shows that it's just medicine almost in itself, no matter where you kind of study, has that kind of diversity, just because it brings people from all walks of life into it. Whereas I guess with a lot of the STEM subjects, there's just a propensity for a lot of males to go into it for a bunch of reasons. Obviously that's changing, like for the better. But yeah, I think it's just med school in general, just wherever you go will have probably a high degree of diversity, at least if it's in some kind of city or something somewhere.
It's a fascinating profession. It really is fascinating to watch the doctors and think about how they are in the doctor's room versus how they are when they go and see the patients, because they do put on and I see myself doing it now. You put on a persona, and that's not a bad thing at all. That's a good thing, because you give the patient confidence in doing that. But it's so like I'm not divulging the secrets now, but obviously like a doctor just quickly look up the notes of a patient, why they've come in roughly, and then they'll see that this patient was on a certain medication, and they'll just go to Google and they'll quickly Google that medication, be like, okay. But then they'll go and see the patient, they'll be like, I hear you've been taking this, right? Yes, okay. So obviously, as you know, the side effect is this, and it's all done to instill confidence in the patient, which is a very good thing. But yeah, it's just fascinating to see how they change their persona based on the circumstance they find themselves in. And I think it's quite exhausting in a way, the fact that they have to keep doing that throughout the whole day, whether they're speaking to staff, whether they're teaching, whether they're interacting with patients, when they're on their own. It's so varied. It's such an interesting job that you have to do, and everyone knows about this job. It's not one of those jobs like data analyst where like
okay, so
that could mean a lot of
do?
things. I think the funniest one's like I work in IT. Okay.
It's my sister for a while she was a project manager, so no one in my family actually understood what she does. The thing is, obviously, the only thing that Pakistanis actually understand is either like engineering, lawyer, or medicine. So like my sister went down into the more, say, businessy route, like project management, that kind of stuff, which is obviously very different to any other profession that's happened in the family. Well, to be fair, only my dad's a doctor, and then I've gone into medicine. But my sister went down, like she didn't really like that area, so she just did whatever she wanted to. And yeah, even now my parents still don't actually understand what she does.
It's I think that's common with a lot of different professions.
Yeah, that is,
obviously, because it's just it's like one of those unifying professions where you see it all around the world. Wherever you go, there'll be someone who deals with healthcare, and you have your nurses, you have your doctors, and because of that, everyone has a perception of doctors. And I find that the perception of doctors is quite consistent as well. Like the role that a doctor serves in society is always going to be the same, and it's always going to get a certain level of respect, and it's definitely a profession to not take lightly. Maybe that ties into what you were saying before about almost it's a matter of respect, that you're in a profession which is so hard to get into and so important and such a privileged position to be in, that we almost owe it to the profession to work hard and do it justice and be the best version of yourself you can be. So I do understand that. I think, and obviously that doesn't just mean getting good exam results, because not everyone has the facilities to do that. But it might mean being proud of your job, or taking it seriously, going into your placements, saying thank you to the doctors who teach you, forging opportunities for yourself, and just taking it seriously. I do agree with that. I think each student needs to do that, and it can be done in their own way. And I think for me, for example, I'm an example of someone who did it my own way. So I didn't just focus on getting the highest raw mark. I did my exams. So far, I've always done my exams to a point where I feel like I know what I'm doing, but I don't follow a rigid structure. to my revision or anything like that. I literally just, when I'm in the hospital, I'll make like earmarks of things that I'm not very good at, if that makes sense. So for example, last week I realized that I just wasn't particularly good at understanding different rashes. So over the weekend and now today, I've just been reading up on the different rashes, the different viruses that can cause different rashes, and the ways that they can be treated. And I don't know. I go off of like instinct basically, and I don't have like a checklist of things that I should be studying. That's how I like to do it. And I guess what I'm saying in this bit is just that we all approach it in our own way.
Yeah, I basically did it in the same way, but I kind of automated it with Anki basically, where I wouldn't specifically go out and start studying a particular thing just for the sake of it. I would either just in my wider reading, just out of interest, be reading something, or maybe I'd heard something, or maybe something was mentioned in a lecture that I either didn't quite understand, or was I kind of knew something, or I couldn't really remember much about it if it was a concept from a previous year. And I'll just go down reading down that route and just kind of learning, absorbing, or revising that kind of stuff, whether it's on Wikipedia or some random, literature review on something, and I just randomly learned that way. But the way I've kind of automated it was just with Anki, because every single thing that's been mentioned by any kind of tutor or lecturer has been put into an Anki flashcard somewhere for me. So it's all there, and it will just kind of, obviously with Anki, with the way it just randomly comes up according to the forgetting curve and the algorithm within it, it will come up at a certain time. So it'll just kind of automatically be revised for me. Well, as in I would be revising it, but it would come up without me having to think about it. Just every day I'd kind of go on Anki, what's it going to show me today? And I think that's actually...
I have a challenge for you though. Okay. I have a challenge for you on that.
Yeah.
Did I interrupt you, by the way? I don't know if it... Okay. So with that, I do have an opinion where if you're if you're using Anki or a platform to help you revise, it means that you don't have to keep self-reflecting in the same way, because it's not up to you to know where you're strongest and weakest in your studies. It's figuring it out for you based off the questions you're getting right and your recall in certain topics. So you almost don't have to think about what you're good or bad at. That's one of my qualms with software like that, because I'm just arguing my side because this is what I do. Like naturally I'm going to argue for it, but the reason why I like the way I do it is because I have to keep reflecting on what I'm good and bad at. And if I don't do that successfully, then I won't do very well, because it's up to me to know where my strengths lie and my weaknesses lie. So all the time I'm reflecting on what I know and don't know. I'm thinking, how well do I actually understand this? Because there's no machine, there's no software telling me you don't get this because you keep getting this topic wrong. I have to think whether I understand it myself. And I think in getting good at self-reflecting and understanding where my knowledge lies, it's really helped me, for example, in language learning, where I can notice, I really am struggling on this certain tense or something like that. I can notice gaps in my knowledge more easily. So I'm not trying to say that one way is better than the other, but I'm just saying like that's something I think I would notice, is that I would want to retain that self-reflection.
Yeah. So it's literally that. It's your level of introspection on everything. Just because I have it automated doesn't mean I get rid of that level of introspection or just self-reflection and thinking, how well do I actually know this? Because just being able to recall it and actually knowing it is very different in the way that you actually end up studying the cards. And I've designed the cards to allow me to kind of figure that out whenever I am recalling something, because a lot of when I recall something or when I understand something is different, at least it feels different in my brain. And the thing is that having it done with Anki actually gives you a finer level or a deeper level of granularity in terms of what you do and don't know. There are certain facts that I just struggle to remember. A certain type of fact that I struggle to remember more than others. It's very difficult to kind of figure that out without that kind of data input, being able to see that for you. And the thing is, if there's a card that I select to have hard or repeat more than 6 times, I think I've said it to 5 or 6 times, it will get flagged and it will come up and it will be flagged, so that then I can see it. And then then I can see all of those flagged cards, and I'll usually go over it in a week, and then I'll be able to see, okay, I'm kind of flopping at this kind of topic. And usually it tends to come up in clusters, right, in certain topics. And I can see specifically what within that topic, because I will already know that I'm finding this topic kind of hard and that I'm probably not so clear in it in my head. But then Anki will specifically show me which parts I am actually struggling with to a really deep level, because the way I've built my cards is that everything starts from a very high level surface view and it just gets gradually deeper. So sometimes it's just the surface level that I'm just not really seeing the bigger picture. Sometimes it's just in the middle. I'm failing to see that connection down into the deeper roots. But sometimes it's just a really niche problem, or a really niche fact that it doesn't really matter if you can't remember it. So then I'll just be like, oh, okay, whatever, it's really not that deep. But when it's one of those more surface level things, I don't know. I think Anki actually, or at least the way I do it, gives me, I already know if I find something hard or not, or if I'm like struggling with something. But then Anki just gives me that extra data that I need to really pinpoint, and it becomes really efficient that way. At least from.
Do you not think that you're capable of determining those things yourself? Do you not think you're capable of looking at a topic?
Far less efficient though. How are you meant to figure out which kind of specific aspect within a particular disease that you are struggling to understand straight away? And doing that over, say, 300 conditions and being able to take a mental note of each one, it just takes a lot of mental load off of your brain. And if you just do it with constant review cycles, I do understand the point where you're getting from, where it can be easy to just kind of fall back and relax and just not really take any care. And then as long as you get through your flashcards for the day, you're doing fine, right? But yeah, and some people might probably do that. And I would advocate against that. Like I wouldn't recommend that. And I think any advice that I give to people when, like, say, if I'm giving advice to younger years that are using my flashcards, or if I'm just explaining someone how I use Anki, I always try and make sure that I get across that I'm trying to do some kind of, like, the way I've set everything up and the way I review it is so that it sets up like a random kind of neural net within my brain. And it actually allows me to see connections between different fields and different conditions that you wouldn't initially see when you study things separately. And that's a major thing, like a huge thing, because you can study.
But you don't think you can get that? You do not think you can get that from studying it yourself anyway?
Yes, but not in the same way with Anki, because I'll be reading, say, it would give me a question about a particular condition or something. And then the next question will be a different question from a different condition in a completely different specialty that you wouldn't even consider studying together at all.
But you could.
Okay, how would you do that in an efficient way that doesn't take a lot of time? I struggle to see, like, I'm not just going to flick and land on a random page in a textbook. I guess you could do that actually, but I don't see how else you could do that in a way that's automated. And then you get all of those other functionalities where it's going to show your weakest links anyway and slowly solidify them in your head. And at the same time, when you're reviewing cards, because every card, the next card is just completely random, that you suddenly, because those two are put together, one next to the other, you're like, oh, that's an interesting connection there for some reason that you probably won't even realize.
I think by taking when learning something, really trying to contextualize it and understand it, and not think about a condition as isolated, because obviously any condition has effects across the whole body. It's systemic a lot of the time. When learning a condition, so say recently I've been trying to improve on my immunology. It all ties together, and not being afraid of going on those tangents, finding a certain thing that I didn't know about, and going down that train, whether it be one of the blood cancers, and then going down the train and realizing, actually, I don't really know how blood cells develop and separate over time. So I need to learn more about that. And then I look at how the bone marrow works, and they're all tying into each other. But in doing it, I'm just contextualizing it. I'm not being guided. I'm just going off of what I know and what I don't know, because there'll be areas while I'm reading that I get that bit, and I just keep going, and then I go, wait, I don't know what this is. And you can go back and forward, and you're just seeing these things all playing together, and you're just literally tailoring it based off what you do and don't know. For that to work, you have to know what you do and don't know, obviously, but just by sitting there and really trying to fundamentally understand things, and then afterwards trying to sit down and write out how a process works. I don't know, how does this congenital heart defect work? What are the implications of it? How does tetralogy of Fallot work? Where does it start? What are the effects of it systemically? How do you treat it? Why do those drugs work? What else do you give those drugs for? So like prostaglandins. Why do you give prostaglandins in certain congenital heart defects? What do they do? What can you use when prescribing prostaglandins? How can you use prostaglandins to treat other conditions? Like, do you get where I'm coming from? I'm not saying that this way is better. In fact, I can see how doing it through Anki is better. But like,
the thing,
yeah.
So to even make the cards in the first place, I would have to do that entire process.
But what about someone who didn't make the cards? Just someone who inherited the cards?
good point. The thing is, the way I've made the cards already goes through that process. So I go through that. So I'd have to go through that process and make the cards. And then when I study those cards, or if someone just studies that card, so then like, I would study those cards, right? And then that's me doing it for a second time almost, because I'm condensing all of that information down into chunks that I can put into a flashcard format, right? And then
you're making it easier for people. Because you're giving them the information, and then the network is telling them what they do and don't know. But couldn't they do that themselves? That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
If they knew themselves well enough, could they not figure out these different areas themselves? And that might be better for them in self-reflection. Sorry for playing devil's advocate here, but like I have always recommended, say, people making their own cards, because that's a lot of the learning process for me. But the thing is that there's a matter of efficiency you get from just, because it takes a lot of time to condense all of those cards down into a way that's manageable for a flashcard format, and to be able to do a lot of it. It takes a lot of time and effort to condense all of it down. And having it all condensed down into a singular format. The thing is that I'm not talking about connections within a singular condition or within related conditions or conditions within a specialty. I'm talking about things that will be that are seemingly completely unrelated, but they bring up some random connection. Like, I don't know, some random connection between glaucoma and some hematological cancer or something, just because of a particular immune cell that was mentioned in that card in glaucoma, and then the next card which you were studying happened to be on a hematological cancer, and then it had that same concept for that immune cell. But you would almost, like, what kind of situation would you go through that? You'd be going through specialties for like 10 hours to be able to get through that route. This isn't a connection, a legit one. I've just made up some random thing, by the way. But just, I'm studying a card, and then the next card is just that random card that also has that same immune cell. And I'm like, that's interesting. And then I'll be like, what does that immune cell actually do properly again? And I'll Google it and stuff. And this igniting that kind of connection. And sometimes I don't even need to Google, because I just hadn't considered that fact, that connection before. Because I'm talking about connections at a really, really low, like small level, which kind of helps build a connection between every single condition. I understand the initial learning process, which you said, that's what I do anyway. And it's definitely the best thing to, well, I mean, I'm biased, but I definitely think that is the best thing. When you are learning something initially, you should go through all of the processes and just find out and just go down rabbit holes, basically, in terms of what you don't know. That's why Wikipedia is so good, because of the backlinks down to different things. There might be some random, random cell that I don't really know what it does. And I'll just Google that cell. And then also you go onto Wikipedia and it just has all the different links to all that cell. And you're like, oh, I kind of recognize this. Let me just open that in a new tab. And I just open all the seemingly relevant links or things that I don't really know into new tabs. And I'll just go through and skim them. And then because you're skimming through them, and because they're linked, you'll start seeing the back and forth linkage between all of it. And you're going down that level. Like that.
That's what I do, at least when I'm building the cards. And that's what I do even when I'm studying the cards sometimes. When, it was something from a long time ago, or maybe I just didn't really understand it fully at that time for some reason, or I just somehow managed to gloss over it without realizing, and then I'll just go back into it. And I say if you're taking someone else's flashcards or someone else's notes or something, you shouldn't sacrifice that. What I say is, if those notes are sufficient and good, then use them, and you don't really have to write your own, I don't think, but you should still go through and do that learning process of going down rabbit holes and reading and just finding out, just like, oh, okay, I don't really know this properly. Let me just read about that. And then within that thing, there was something else you didn't really know that would explain what you were trying to figure out in the first place. So now you have to go into keep doing that, and you should do that. But I don't think it's worth the time to go and make that exact same resource that already exists, whether it be notes or flashcards or something.
I get what you mean, especially with the flashcards, like using it as a revision resource, even as a learning tool sometimes, I completely agree with. But I think it applies to a lot of areas of life, not using one stream of information as the only stream of information to use. And I'm saying, if you're going to use one stream of information to learn and revise, I think it should just be self-reflection, knowing where you're weaker, and spending time to really understand it fundamentally, not memorizing facts, not looking at numbers, just understanding how a certain process works. I think that's the most efficient use of time. But yeah, Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we're kind of agreeing.
Yeah, we are. But that's actually huge. Use multiple resources. People get stuck onto one singular resource just because they like it. Maybe it suits their learning style and stuff. But just use resources that don't suit your learning style.
It's the same as languages, bro. It's languages, bro.
It's exactly
all the same.
It's just learning, man. So I made a video on how to use my year 3 flashcards, right? And like 30 minutes of it is me explaining the different resources that I used and why I use different things and how I put it all together. Because like I was saying, there's so much importance in actually doing that process, and I don't want people to just kind of like, oh, it's already done, so I'll just sit and study.
It's a bit of a pet peeve is seeing people who don't do the thinking in a certain thing. They just follow rules and they're not understanding it. That's one of the doctors who's changed my whole approach to med school I've had on this block. He sits down with us every Friday and he speaks to us for about 3 hours, and he doesn't really bring slides or anything. He just sits there and he's just sussing us all out. He's seeing how well we actually understand things instead of just memorizing. So he'll ask you a question and then say, but he'll say, wait. But how does that work though? Or he'll ask a question related to it and say, what do you think would happen if their sodium levels went down? And then seeing what the student thinks about it. He really wants us to just understand things. And I think, I don't know, that approach leads to more self-reflection, and then, you can be an efficient student. But the multiple streams of information, but I really do agree with. I don't want to keep making the same point. So I think I'm fairly done in that part of the conversation.
I mean, I didn't, in that thing where you had that doctor who would just sit down and just talk and see how much you understand. I had a consultant, so I was on a placement for 3 weeks on care of the elderly. So it was a stroke ward, and the consultant there, he was similar. He was he's quite the character, and he can be a bit scary. Like, you don't really know how to take him sometimes. He makes some, awkwardly, sometimes seemingly offensive jokes, but everyone loves it kind of thing. But yeah, amazing guy, amazing patient manner. It's absolutely insane the kind of relationship he has with the patients. And I guess the type of patients at that point as well. So you're mentioning that thing where, everyone probably has that moment where they have that shift. They're like, oh, okay, I need to start taking this seriously. I'm going to be a doctor kind of thing. Like you were saying earlier. This was it for me, I guess, because on that ward, because of the type of patients you were dealing with, they were basically patients in their last probably few months, if not days. I literally had a patient who was literally in her last day or days, last 24 hours. And I'll get to that in a bit. But basically, the way he would go about teaching us is, I don't know. So for most of third year, I found it mostly a waste of time personally, even though it was my first kind of clinical year, but it was just extremely inefficient. If there's one thing I hate doing, it's wasting time. And it just irritated me so much. And I'm not going to put the blame on anyone. I'm going to take the blame for it. Maybe I just wasn't proactive enough, or I was going about it the wrong way, or I wasn't really understanding it in terms of firms and how to go about getting the most out of it. Or maybe I was just pretty unlucky in terms of the teams I was put with. Because it was really hard to build a rapport with the team just in certain placements, just because the team was so big and it was rotating. And because they were so busy at that time, it was so hard to actually like get in and do something. So I would turn up, be there for a long time and stuff. And sometimes I would, stand, because they were busy, I would stand around just following them along and, kind of just help them out, try and do something. Sometimes I would try and be really proactive and, go around doing stuff. A lot of the time I just have to kind of do stuff on my own, without much guidance, with very little teaching. So it just kind of, I don't know, I feel like there was a lot more I could be getting out of all of this, or out of all of this time. And it just wasn't spent too well. Whether it was because I was unlucky with the teams I was put with at a certain time, whether it was just me just not doing well, but maybe it was just the system in certain places just wasn't so good. I don't know. But basically, what I'm saying is a lot of it was a waste of time, except these 3 weeks in the same hospital. And it was, with that doctor on the care of the elderly. And literally on the first, basically every single ward round, every single day, me and my partner would have to check the breath, literally from the first day, check the breath sounds on each patient that we were going across. And whatever we would say on the breath sounds would go straight into the book. No questions asked. Obviously, to a certain extent. Now, the thing is, because he has so much clinical experience and stuff, he was so good. Like, I was mesmerized by his understanding and just clinical intuition. He would, if we said something and he would be like, not quite right, then obviously, either he'd tell one of the other doctors to check, or he would check himself. And we would do the same with heart sounds. And it would be me, like my partner on one patient, then I'll do the next patient, then, go around. And whatever we would say would pretty much go straight into the logbook. And that in itself was so productive. It was unbelievable. And just through like learning that stuff. And a lot of the time we would like listen to heart sounds. And the thing where it was about understanding it, right? So when we were starting off in like our first week and a half, he wouldn't say, don't try and give a diagnosis. Don't try and say, left lower lobe, crackles or something, or whatever, crepitations. Don't try and specify it. Just say, what does it sound like? And then when it came to heart patterns especially, it was just describe the sound. Don't try and say what it is. Don't try and say what type of murmur, what timing it is. Just make the sound. And really loud, he would, like, in the middle of the ward, everyone would just look at him, but it's just him, right? And he would be like, does it sound like or like what would it sound like? Like really loud. And he'd just he would repeat the sound for like a minute straight. And he'd keep doing different sounds, and then I'd be like, that one. Yeah. And that's the way he would be going around it. And so for so long, he would just try and figure out, like, what does it sound like? Just being able to notice what's normal and not normal, just again, understanding for it. And then after that, then at one point he sat us down and gave us a big teaching session, like for an hour straight. And again, no notes, no nothing, no slides, and just keep going on about it and just breaking it down for us and figuring out what it is. And then again, we'd go back onto a different teaching session. And the best thing about these days that we had with him were only 3 hours. We'd come in 9 a.m., start the ward round, do the ward round for hour and a half, and then we'd go and do 1 or 2 different teaching sessions on interesting cases around the hospital. That was it, done. It was so efficient, and I'd learned so much in that time just because he was so knowledgeable and really good at teaching. And the way he taught us, just by putting us out there, getting us into it, and then breaking down every single aspect down to a T, it was unbelievable. But
that sounds like a very, very good teacher.
He
That's
was insane.
the sort of teacher I aspire to one day be.
Yeah, same. But
If I
don't know,
pass my last years.
I went a bit on, but yeah, sorry.
No. I think it's good. I think it's a good example of how a teacher could be or can be a good teacher. That's what I would consider to be a good teacher. But yeah, the best teacher in my life ever, I think, was my piano teacher. That's just a fun fact. I moved to the UK when I was 7, and then I was taught by her until I left school and went to uni. And the best teacher. A lot of the time we'd sit there and in the half an hour lesson, we'd spend over half of it just talking. We weren't doing piano, but I was learning the whole time, and it all went into making me a better pianist. And I'm so lucky that I had her. So yeah, obviously teachers are just such a huge influence in your life, and they can completely change your approach to learning something. So yeah. That's
the thing. The best teachers are the ones that don't even make you realize you're learning. It's like with kids and stuff, like when they don't even realize they're doing math problems, they're like, oh, I'm doing math problems. Yeah. No, it's like that's the point you want to be with it, like as a teacher. Make students don't even realize they're learning.
I hope one day I really like teaching. I'm not quite knowledgeable enough in many things to be able to teach them yet, but one day I really hope that I could be a good teacher. So yeah, I'm trying to learn more.
I disagree with that. I think you should just start teaching people who are one level below you, because the best person to teach the person who is one level below you is the person who is like one level above them, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, yeah.
Yeah. If I've just figured out how to figure out a certain math problem, like, is it math problem or maths problem?
Well,
no, it's math. Oh man, I listen to too much, like pretty much everything I listen to is
Americanized,
Americans. Yeah. Oh, the other day I said route in a voice message. I was like, what the hell? Oh my God. But anyway, yeah. So say if you figured out how to figure out a certain problem, say in maths or chemistry or something, and someone else has just got onto that problem or trying to figure it out and struggling, the best person to teach them isn't going to be the teacher at that point. It's going to be you, because you've just went through every single step that they have probably just going or about to go through in terms of figuring out or getting confused at a certain point, and you are fresh with that. So experts are good at teaching people who are nearly experts. Noobs are better at teaching people who are, even slightly more noob than them. The best teacher for you at your level is the one that's just slightly above you.
I agree. I haven't thought about it enough. I think I agree, but also a part of me thinks that the better you get at something, the better you become at something, the more you realize how you can teach it as well. If I'm teaching someone just one level below me, I don't yet understand the topic well enough to know what is important in that topic to teach. That's just a counter argument, but overall I do agree with you, because they can empathize with you better.
Yeah, but it depends. Yeah, obviously you aren't going to try and teach them something super complex thing. You're only going to teach them what you know, and because you teaching what you know for them to get at your level is an improvement on where they are, and they'll get to your level quicker than an expert trying to teach them. Because when you get so high, like when you become so good and you're so expert, like even say when I'm trying to help my brother with certain biology concepts and stuff, so he was doing like action potentials and stuff. And to be fair, a lot of the stuff from A-level biology in terms of action potentials and nerve impulses is pretty much identical, even at a higher level at uni, at least how we were taught. So a lot of it's still pretty much the same. Yeah, we'll just learn a few more channels and a few more nuances and whatnot, but it is otherwise it's the same. But even then, I was still struggling to remember like how much does he actually know, and you know.
But what if the expert really understands the student and really understands the point the student's at, and is a really good teacher? I think that's the best of all, in my opinion.
That's different, but yeah, and if you're a legitimate like teacher and stuff, you're always going to be, you would have had the experience of what people would tend to get stuck on at certain points and stuff. But the thing is that you don't become a good teacher just by starting to teach when you're an expert.
Okay.
You need to start teaching from like day one almost. I guess that's kind of the thing where, that's the kind of thing where I would, whenever I learn something new, I would always just try and tell my dad or brother about it and try and essentially teach them. So when I was going into the whole investing and finance thing, that's kind of what I would do. I'd read one thing and learn one thing, and then I'll just try and explain it to like, say with the concept of shorting stocks, where in a simple way, you make money when the price of the stock goes down, right? So usually you buy when the price is low and you sell when it's high, but here you kind of sell when it's high and you buy when it's low kind of, and you make money the other way around. And I was trying to figure out how that works and stuff. And I'd only just figured it out. And I was like, okay, I didn't know this. I kind of know it now. Let me try and explain it to my dad. Right. And I'm learning how to teach. And at the same time, I'm figuring out all of the holes in my knowledge in terms of what is required for me to explain it. Because you can only explain something if you understand it fully, well, to its best ability, at least. So it's a two-way thing. One, you will learn even better and you'll pick out those holes, which you said were so important to pick out in your own knowledge. So I think teaching is, you should kind of be teaching all the way up the ladder.
I agree. In terms of, I think teaching for consolidation of your own learning and improvement of your understanding of something is really good. But ultimately, if I said to you, would you rather learn piano from me, from scratch, for the next 10 years, or would you rather learn from my teacher who I grew up with? I think you'd probably do better learning from my teacher, who's an absolute expert and has taught since as what you were talking about, since she started learning, she started teaching. I think she started teaching when she was about 11. So she's been doing that her whole life. At every step of the way, she's been teaching. And now she's incredible. Yeah, she's incredible. She's an amazing teacher.
But she was teaching since she was 11. So she wasn't an expert. Well, I mean, she could have been, but I doubt she was an expert at 11.
It was good for her. That was good for her to teach people below her. But I think now what would be good for you, the learner, I'm closer to your level in piano than she is. She's better than me, obviously. But I still think it'd be better for you to learn from her than compared to learning from me. Or say learning from someone so I've been playing piano since I was 2 or 3. So I've been playing piano for nearly 20 years. If you were learning from someone who's just started last year, so they're 1 tier above you, I would still argue that it's better to learn from me than to learn from them. It would be good for that person who's just started to teach you, and you'd still benefit from it. But I still think overall it'd be better to have me, not to blow my own trumpet or not to play my own piano. But yeah, I think it would be... Yeah. Did you see where I'm coming from? I might be wrong. But.
Yeah, I do. But the thing is, I think teachers like that are pretty far and few between, or like in my personal opinion. And that's not to like degrade a lot of teachers and stuff, but I think it just takes time and experience and, teaching from a very young age, just out of habit or just natural ability, and then you kind of stick with it every process of the way. If you're teaching every step of the way, you've got experience of teaching every step of the way. So you kind of retain that, right? Whereas, and you kind of develop your teaching abilities and learn what works at different levels and stuff. So it's a really big process, right? You need to start from the earliest point possible. So that's my kind of thing, to become, you need to start teaching straight away or at the earliest point possible to become a good teacher in the long run. And you will become a better teacher in the long run as well. So that's why I think, and the thing is that person will still at least benefit like one thing from you. And I'm not saying become a formal teacher for them, become their piano teacher. I'm like, just teach them something in piano and you'll get that experience in teaching.
I agree. From the teaching side, it's better. From the teaching side, it's better for you to teach the whole way through. But I think for the learner, it's still best to learn from an expert.
Yeah,
a lot of the time. Not all the time, but If it's one concept, would I rather learn? So, for example, today I learned the clotting cascade from an F2, and I think it's better to learn that cascade from him than from maybe a consultant a lot of the time, because he actually went to Imperial. He said he remembers it. He was only doing it a couple of years ago. He really understands how we thought as students, and so he taught it actually really well. Compared to the consultants who learned it, a lot of them 40 years ago, and it's changed since then, and they can't really empathize in the same way. With that, I agree. But I'm more talking like as a teacher, like through, teaching you how to be a good pianist, or not just a simple isolated thing. Like the learning of a craft overall, I think is better to learn from an expert, because they know what to teach you. And I think we're not arguing different things. I think we're arguing different things.
I don't want to be in GCSE maths and having an A-level student teaching you. Yeah, exactly. I'd actually want the legitimate teacher. Well,
but you could have an A-level student teaching you one of the rules, because if they've done that rule,
they'd probably teach it better than the teacher. Yes, that's exactly what I mean.
We agree now. Yes. Oh, good. Okay, and I've improved my opinion now, because I've never thought about this before, so I appreciate that. And the last thing I wanted to add is that we're definitely in the right profession, because obviously medicine is all about teaching, so we'll be doing that for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, that I think. I mean, I definitely remember mentioning that on multiple interviews, that it's the teaching aspect that's so good about medicine, and it's so lifelong as well, like going through every step of the career as well.
But I'm aware, I'm looking at the time, and it's getting later on in the evening, and we've been talking for probably at least 5 minutes now, so probably just
a bit longer than that.
So we may have to leave it, but thank you very much for sitting down with me and having this conversation. It's been really good.
Yeah, you're saying like we don't do this every other week or something.
We should do it again sometime.
Yeah, maybe next week.
Oh, it'd be an honor.
All right.
But I hope you have a good one, Subaan. Have a good week.
Likewise. All right.
Appreciate it.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Getting It.
If you enjoyed this episode,
or didn't,
then feel free to leave us a rating and review on the Apple Podcasts app, or on the Apple Podcasts website.
We'd love to hear your thoughts, ideas, or questions about anything we discussed, so feel free to email us at thoughts@gettingit.co.uk.
You can also reach us on Twitter or Instagram at gettingit_pod.
You can find all the links in the show notes.